we're going to do a little interview style. I hope that's okay. And sort of probe you and ask you all sorts of questions, which I think will be really helpful for our supporters and, you know, people that we can reach online, just to sort of give them an insight that it's not actually as difficult as they might think. It's just knowing where to find people and resources that can sort of help you on your journey.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we'll kick off, and I don't know if Rachel, you want to kick us off with some of the questions that you had.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
to keep everyone listening to my voice.
Not at all. Yeah, we've got quite a few questions here. I'll just start off with the first one, which is quite a good introductory one. How can we start a conversation about veganism with children who have been consuming meat and dairy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because when we went vegan, my kids were 1 and 3, so they were still really, really diddy. And you know, they're just doing what they're told as little kids and eating what I'm giving them. And but for me, I still really wanted to explain everything in a child friendly way with them. So I think it seems so long ago now, it was only 6 years ago, but I tried to approach everything in a really, really positive way, and obviously use age appropriate language and just say, look, oh, you know, mummy's found out about, because what it was for me, it was the dairy industry. And I found that out while I was still breastfeeding my youngest. So you can imagine that hit me really hard. And I was vegetarian for 21 years before, and I didn't even have a clue about the dairy and the egg industry. So I obviously didn't want to just go and put all that on my 3-year-old. And that's when I started looking for books, because I thought that would be the easiest way to explain, which is when I couldn't find any. And you know, the rest is history, because I obviously wanted to write my series because of that reason. But I think it's just really important to try and have a positive conversation and kind of explain the benefits of a plant-based diet, and the health benefits with that, and also how you know, a vegan lifestyle will help protect the planet. Kids are quite aware, and they want to be planet protectors, and they want to be superheroes and things. So I think it's really, really important to encourage them to ask questions, keep it a positive conversation, and just try and discuss where our food does come from. Because when we lived in London, it wasn't really even on our radar. You know, you just go and buy your packets of meat and you don't really think about anything. But when we moved to Suffolk, as I was saying to you before we came on, it's all right in your face. We see the cows in the field 1 week here, and then they're gone, and the kids will say, well, where have they gone, mummy? And so really, I think it's just about trying to have a conversation, get them to ask questions, discuss where our food comes from, and kind of go on a bit of a journey together.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. That kind of leads on to another one that's a bit further down the list, but someone asked as well, was there any particular resources that you'd recommend for either children or adults that you found particularly helpful in your veganism journey?
Yeah, I mean, there are loads now. I think every year, you know, there are more resources coming out, which is so helpful. And like Veganuary and the Vegan Society particularly, they have so many resources for parents. And I'm part of the education network with the Vegan Society, and we put special packs together and template letters for parents. And, you know, we try and make it really easy for people, because it can be really overwhelming. I think as a parent, especially dealing with schools, dealing with nursery settings, I think parents really need it kind of written out for them, so you can go in and feel empowered when you're speaking to schools and teachers and things like that. So I think the Vegan Society is a really good place to start. Laura Chepner is the chair of the education network, and she's just fantastic. If you have any problems and questions, you just get in touch with her, and she will kind of fight that battle for you. She is just amazing. She will contact the school. She's just brilliant. So I think my definite place to be would be the Vegan Society.
That's a really good answer. Thank you. And I've written that down because I'm going to use that, because having, as I said, my 10-year-old nephew is dairy free and severely allergic. So even the smallest amount of dairy will have him in pain and off school, and it's really, really bad. And the school, actually, I'm trying to find a way that I can communicate, because what he's offered on days for school lunches when it's classic macaroni cheese. He cannot have that. What they offer him instead is a dry turkey roll. That's what he gets. And I just think it's so cruel and unfair that, they don't think beyond that to make him feel included when everyone else is having this. Why can't he have the same but a different version? And
not right.
And also, like, a dry turkey roll for a 10-year-old child who's running around at school all day is just not,
No.
I mean, that's not good at all. So I definitely want to do something there. And actually, what I also jumped in because I forgot to do right at the start, which I was supposed to do, was to tell us your story. Tell us about Vivi the Supervegan. Sorry, I think it's because I've just been on your website and I've read so much that
you know it all now. It's old news.
I know it all now. But yeah, I'd be so interested to hear, like, you've mentioned that you've been veggie for 21 years before you sort of learned the horrors of the dairy industry and sort of took you on that path to veganism. But I'm really curious to hear your story and and how you got there and how you incorporated it into your family life. And
of course. So basically, when I first found out about the dairy industry, I was obviously horrified, and I quickly went to my first activist event, like I think it was like 3 weeks after I found out. Now, my husband was like the biggest carnivore I'd ever met. So we'd been together for like, I don't know, it must have been like 8-9 years married by that point. And he had never questioned anything. He'd never even wanted to go vegetarian. As a veggie, I was very happily just cooking his meat and cooking my vegetarian meals. It wasn't really anything that I thought about. It wasn't the same as like when I went vegan and I instantly was like, I couldn't even cook that now. Like, I was so upset by everything. So I knew when I wanted to tell him that I was going vegan, I thought he would probably kill me because he's already celiac. He can't have gluten. So like, I understand your family's problems when it's something so severe, like he gets seriously ill with his autoimmune disease. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have like gluten-free, vegan, like he's just not going to be on board. However, I asked him to watch the video that I watched, which wasn't anything, it wasn't something horrific. It was just a speech by an activist, and he had one very, very short clip at the end which showed a cow being slaughtered. There was nothing else. It was just him talking with a microphone for the rest of the time. My husband watched half of it and it was like the light bulb went on. He made the connection himself, which was a massive relief to me because I wasn't going to have to do it. Because at the time I was thinking, well, I'm going to go vegan, I won't make the children. I was still very much in that mindset, like, well, they can just do what they're doing. But because I had his support and he was like, right, we're all going to do it as a family, that was a massive weight off my shoulders, because then we basically went on that journey together, and we sorted all of the food side. But as I said, very quickly, I wanted to do something more. I felt so terrible that I think because I'd gone vegetarian as a kid, I thought I wasn't hurting animals for my whole life. And when I found out that I was still extremely complicit in it all, that wasn't to my knowledge, but I still had this huge feeling of guilt, and I wanted to give back. So I attended this activist event and got very much involved in the activist community. But I obviously had small children at the time, and I decided I needed to do something else which I could fit in around my normal kind of mum life as well. And when I started looking for books for children, I couldn't find the kind of things I was looking for. And they were kind of more educational and aimed at kind of older children. And that wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted to have children's books which children can read and still laugh at and enjoy, which is hard when you're talking about veganism because it's not exactly a laughing topic. But I tried to create something. That's where Vivi the Supervegan was born. The characters are loosely based on my daughters and our kind of whole journey and experience. My activism really evolved then because I was very heavily involved with my writing and trying to reach parents and families all over the world with my books. And I think I took a step back from the kind of street activism that I was doing before because I found out that I think my activism within the school run and my daily life, just mixing with other parents and families and stuff, I think there's so much power in that. Even just a simple thing of wearing an Animal Justice Project hat because I'm an ambassador for them, so that I get all of their beanies, and you know, it gets people looking at you and asking questions, and then the conversations start, and that's kind of my journey and how we've ended up at this point.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that you've got something exciting up your sleeve. Do I have to leave it there, or can you share?
No, definitely. Yeah, I a few years ago I decided that I can't stop at the books. Like, I love books, but kids, they watch screens all the time, always on their phones, and I understand that that's the world, and I'm nearly 40, and clearly, like, I'm stuck in that old generation of, oh, I like sitting down with a book. So I connected with a lovely TV producer to speak to her about optioning my books and turning them into the world's first vegan TV series for kids, because there just isn't anything out there. And we've been working for 2.5 years together. We've built an incredible team of vegan and vegetarian animation studios, and we've got vegan celebrities to do our voiceovers. And my mission is to try and turn this into a TV series and an app and a YouTube channel. Just have kind of like a one-stop place for everything to do with veganism, and so children can access vegan and eco-friendly content, because there just isn't anything out there. And all the while there's nothing on TV screens, kids just aren't going to be talking about it and knowing that it's a normal thing. So yeah, we're currently seeking investment for that, and once we've got the finances in place, we can get it all into production and get it on our screens for kids.
That's amazing. Well done. Like, on creating this whole world for kids. And I think it's even more special because it's almost like kids, and we see it all the time, that kids probably wouldn't choose to eat animals or eat cheese or whatnot if they knew how that was made. So, but it's almost like by the time kids get to an age where you can have those conversations, well, it's like with adults, it can be really challenging to sort of break down those learned behaviors and challenge that sort of the culture that we grow up in, which very much promotes and supports consuming animal products. Then it can be really difficult also just to break down your family habits, or, you know, it's great that your husband was so supportive and made that connection himself. Imagine
I nearly fell off my chair.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not the case for everyone, and so it can make it quite difficult. So I guess what you're trying to achieve here is to help kids make compassion the default choice and the natural choice, so that we don't have that cognitive dissonance. Because I'm going to be honest, I wince every time I hear kids talk about watching Peppa Pig while they're eating a sausage roll, but that child has no idea, you know, no idea. So it starts right at that early stage, doesn't it, to try and break that down. Yeah. I'll just jump on to the next question. So thank you for sharing that. I'm very excited to hear, and I can't wait to see it on TV. You maybe kind of touched on this a little bit, but I remember once my nephew coming home from one of his friend's birthday parties, and Mom, I got cake. And my sister very swiftly had to be like, Andy, I don't think you can eat that cake. And he was so disappointed. I mean, he's been dairy-free for, like, I think maybe 4 or 5 years now. So now it's not an issue, and he knows what he can and can't have, and he's not fazed by it at all anymore. But back at the time, it was really upsetting for him, because he felt like he didn't fit in with his friends' with his friends, and he can't have the birthday cake, and I can't have this, and I can't have that. And it got me thinking, like, how have maybe you've experienced the same with your kids, but children's birthday parties, kids getting invited to sort of these types of things. How can parents or guardians handle that, where you might not necessarily have supportive or understanding parents? Because I also know of somebody whose vegan child was just told that the stuff that was at the party was vegan, so they would eat it, and it was not.
That's
So
terrible.
yeah, so I think, I don't know if you've experienced the same kind of thing. How do you approach that in a positive way when your kids have been invited to things?
Yeah. I used to dread the party invites, which they come a lot when they're little. Like now mine are in year 5 and year 3. We don't seem to have these big class parties and stuff, but yeah, I used to have them a lot. So my go-to plan when that invite came home would be find out what the party was, what the venue was, and then reach out to the parent and thank them for the invite and explain that my child's obviously vegan. And then just say, and then just offer my help and try and be really, really helpful and give them advice if they needed anything. If they were doing a party at home, and say, let me know if you want me to bring anything, or I can let you know some really good products, and just try and find out what their plan was food wise. So a lot of the time they'd be at like a soft play or a leisure centre or something like that. And the meals would always be the same thing. It would be like nuggets and chips or something just very processed. So I would find out what it is and then make my kids exactly the same and take it in a party box. So when they bring around the plates, just quickly put mine on theirs. I would always stay at the party for that exact reason, with the story you just said, because I trust no one. And I just wouldn't want my kids to be put in that position and not know. That's not nice. So yeah, I would find out what they were having and basically do exactly the same and make it look 10 times better. So a lot of the time kids would be given, you know, just nuggets, chips and baked beans, and my kids would have that, but then they'd have like vegan sweets and cakes and everything that, you know, the other kids don't have. And then they'd all be looking at theirs thinking, what? That's not fair. So I try and always make the plant-based options look better. And so many times the kids would be jealous of what mine would be having. And if a parent isn't comfortable speaking to the other parent, then maybe just go straight to the venue and speak to them directly. But I've never had a negative experience when I've just been really nice and helpful, and just kind of put myself out there to that parent. So we've found that's been the best thing to do.
That sounds great. I have a question actually that I added to the list, which kind of follows on quite nicely from that. But I'll just say before as well, any of our attendees are welcome to either speak out with a question, or you can pop your question in the chat and Lauren and I will read it out for you as well. But yeah, my question was, and it followed on from a conversation that Lauren and I had last week about vegan options in cafes and restaurants. So I was thinking, again, in terms of what we're just talking about there about the haves and have-nots, it seems to me, and this could just be my observation, that often, even in a menu where there's a vegan option or a few vegan options, maybe the kids' menu doesn't have one, or it does have one, but it's really subpar, or just not nutritional at all. And obviously, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine as a parent, you're trying to find something that's kind of healthy and enjoyable for your kid as well. So I guess, like, do you have any comments on, do you think our children maybe being overlooked, or are missing out on these different options that adults are having when it comes to kind of the expanding of vegan options for people?
I think children are being overlooked in every area when it comes to the vegan market. And we were actually discussing that at VegFest a couple of weeks ago in London about veganism within the children's sector, because there isn't anything. And I think kids' menus and kids' choices at restaurants have always been really poor. You know, from my memory growing up, it was always the same. It was like sausages and chips, or nuggets and chips, or a jacket potato. I think it's always been very, very basic and poor. And I think kids are just generally overlooked in life in general. I'm going to go off on a tangent here, because I was ranting to my husband the other day about how kids really don't have any rights or a voice when it comes to like the school setting. You know, they're not taught to critically think. They're taught to do what they're told. And I get, yes, there's a place for obviously discipline and respecting teachers and elders and stuff, but when it comes down to things that they're really uncomfortable about or distressed about, for instance, veganism, talking about how to protect the planet in a session, in a lesson, and then my child not feeling comfortable enough to put her hand up and talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to deforestation to do with the animal agriculture industry, and being told to be quiet from a teacher, and all of these kind of things. I just think children are overlooked, and their opinions, they're squashed by you know, older generations, and that's not right. I think that's obviously, it's always been the done thing, going right back to children should be seen and not heard. But I know we're evolving, but I think there's still a really long way to go. So when it comes down to food, I think plant-based options are limited for adults when you go out, and children then, unfortunately, I think we've got a very long way to go there. They could just offer a smaller version of what the adults have on the menu. I don't know why they don't put that as an option, why they put just something processed and cheap and rubbish for a kid. It just shows that they're not as important, really.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I was going to offer a little tip of what I do. And I know it takes a little bit of time, and I'm sure you've probably done it as well, but I just offer feedback now to everyone. So before I go out for dinner anywhere, I check the menu, and if their options are not great, even for adults, I will send them a message, because I think I agree with you, and it puts kids also, it puts adults and kids in a really difficult position, because you have to be really solid in your values to stick with. I mean, I've spent a holiday in Spain where all I could eat for a week was basically the drawn peppers and chips, and I was not fine with it, but you know, I was okay with it. But it's really difficult for kids, and it can be so confusing because of course they want to have something nice or tasty or whatnot. But I think just offering feedback and offering to assist. So, you know, having been to a restaurant where there's a couple of vegan options on the mains, which is great, but there's no starter and there's no dessert and there's no plant-based milk, so you can't have anything other than a black coffee. I always offer that feedback, and I also always check the kids section as well for my nephew, because my nephew is one of 3. So if his brothers are tucking into something else and he's offered a lemon sorbet, which
it's so boring, doesn't it?
Standard, you know, a 9-year-old's not really fussed for that. So I always offer feedback and try to do it in a really sort of not condescending way, but I really tried to make people think that, you know, if I'm coming out for dinner with my friends and family and they can all have a starter and a dessert, but I can't, that doesn't feel so nice. And I would love to, you know, indulge. So letting them know that like we're up for spending money when we go out as a real treat, and that also for kids, like, you know, having a few options of it's not difficult. I've also shared the link with some places that, you know, you can order the dairy-free like sticks to go in your coffee. You can order them, they can bulk order them online, so they don't have to worry about shelf life if they don't have big demand.
Exactly. It's so simple. It's so simple. I think you're right though. If we don't speak up and, you know, advocate and be a voice for our children with restaurants, then they don't know the demands there. I think a lot of people would just go like, oh, okay, that's a bit rubbish, and not go there, or you know, leave feeling a little bit disappointed, and then just think, oh, we won't go back. But unless we speak up and tell the staff and tell these establishments that there is a need and there is a demand, they're never going to change. So I think that's a great way of, you know, bringing activism into your daily life. You don't have to be out on the street holding a sign. You can just be a voice for your kids, be a voice for the animals, and just say like, we really want to come here and support you, but, you know, bam, bam, bam kind of thing. Yeah. And to be honest, I've had some really positive responses from that. So that I have had responses where they've said like, yeah, we know that our menu is not that great. We are going to be looking into it. And, you know, offering simple swaps, you know, that they can make soups without milk, or they can make, you know, something that everyone can still have, or just tweaking a couple of their vegetarian dishes can then accommodate vegans as well. And you know, because we obviously understand that especially small businesses have to go with what most people want, but with small swaps they can actually accommodate more people, and you know, and it also spreads, doesn't it? Because we all share online where we've been to great places or found great products, so they do get a lot of good marketing on the back of it. So definitely. Just share that one. No, it is a great tip.
Great. Thank you. I'll just read out the next question. So again, I've kind of picked one that links to what I've touched upon in terms of food for children and the media they consume. So do you have any thoughts about the use of farmed animals in children's cartoons, books, toys? and the food that's often marketed for kids. So lots of milk-based food, chicken nuggets, for example.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. How long have you got? No, the hypocrisy is unreal. Like, I can't bear it. I think, the brainwashing and conditioning starts from such a young age, as we were saying. So when you're watching Disney films and kids films, they're all about, you're on the animal side. Like, the humans are often the villains, and everyone is like championing the animal and trying to get them away from the human. Like, I could literally list so many when you think about them. But it's just insane, because the children will watch that and they will feel that way, and then they will go into the kitchen, and even the parents watching that will feel the same way, but then they'll go into the kitchen and then they'll feed them those animals they've just been watching. And I just think it's so corrupt, because it's a way of making children be this particular way. So they will grow up thinking it's normal and natural and necessary to eat animal products, to love animals, but to do that anyway, to love certain animals and view them as pets, and then still go to a farm and cuddle a lamb, but go back on Easter and eat a lamb, but not really think about it. And yeah, I think this is why what I'm trying to do is so difficult, and why we have doors shut in our face on a regular basis, because we are trying to challenge something which has gone on for generations, and it's a multi-million pound industry, isn't it? And the animal agriculture, I can never say that without getting in a tongue tie. That industry is it's feeling threatened, and the more people that stand up and try and do things which are offering balance, which is what I'm trying to do, trying to put a show out there which is showing children that it's actually nice and it is normal to be kind to animals and not want to eat them and protect our planet. So I think with the cartoons and the marketing side of things, it's just their clever way that they've always done it. But with the internet and with the younger generations waking up to it, things are changing. So I'm positive for the future. I just think we've got a long way to go.
Well, you're helping to change that, so
I'm trying very hard. It's
hopefully, it's a slow process, but I think like more and more people are aware of it. And that leads me on to a question that I received from actually a friend of mine. Sadly, she couldn't make it this morning, but she has 2 kids. One is 6 and one is 3. And the 6-year-old, he, of his completely own accord, has said he doesn't want to eat animals.
Okay.
Don't want to eat animals. He's very adamant in that. He's never enjoyed or happily eaten like an obvious piece of meat, like a chicken breast or a piece of beef or something like that. Of course it's different, or it has been different when it's been a sausage or it's been something that doesn't look like an animal. But he's been very persistent in it, and my friend and her husband are trying to be extremely supportive that he's said this. So they went to the library and they took out a whole bunch of plant-based recipe books so that he could be involved in trying to find some recipes and whatnot that he likes. Now, obviously he's 6. So they do go through sort of changes with him. So she's finding it a little bit tricky to navigate, supporting him to the values that he says he has. But there are occasions where he's like, I want that sausage, or I want that pepperoni on the pizza. So she's like, how do I, sorry, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. So, on the occasions that he does want to eat the meat, his question is the animal okay?
Oh gosh.
So 1, she doesn't know how to answer that question. And 2, she's like, how do I support him in the values he's told me he has without holding him to it on the occasion that he says, I want to eat that sausage? So
that's such a tough situation, because obviously I don't know if I'll be the best person to answer that, because obviously we're vegan as a family. I'm assuming that your friends aren't vegan themselves.
They aren't vegan. They are one of these families who probably have reduced animal products by about 50% in their house.
Flexitarian or plant-based.
Yeah. And I was wondering, maybe if you had, I know your kids are they're just vegan now, but did you have any sort of similar instances or sort of questions from them, or?
We haven't, but I've got lots of friends who have. And I've got friends who, you know, their kids were so solid at the start, and then as they've got older, they've kind of changed. And I think it depends on your family setup. Like it's obviously a very different situation for each individual family. So for us, we're united like with our vegan ethics and our values. So the children obviously, they copy what their parents do, don't they? And because we're so proud of the way we live and it is our lifestyle, and they see what I do for a job and they're really, really happy about it and proud of it, they genuinely feel like they're superheroes. They save animals every day just by being them. And I tell them that all the time. So I'm always empowering them. So it's very, very different for us. I think I have had friends, where their kids have change their minds, but that's because the parents they've been in conflict with them with each other. They haven't all been united. They may be like, well, they'll kind of be more plant-based, but then doing activities which wouldn't kind of align with their vegan values and stuff. So I think it's very easy for children to feel confused. And I think unless there's like a sense of unity within a family where you all know what your vegan ethics are and where you're all at, it can be very confusing. So I think for their situation, I guess like it's just important they validate and acknowledge their little, you said he's 6. How he feels. And I would try and really emphasize that they support his decisions. They may not be doing it themselves, but they support his decisions and respect his desire to want to help animals and to help the planet. And I would really try and build him up for that. I think even though when I went vegetarian, my dad was a big carnivore, but I think he still really tried to build me up for what I was doing. He may not have agreed himself, but I think it's important as a parent to acknowledge what your child's decided to do, especially if it's on his own. I think maybe they could explain that people do have different eating habits, but remind him of why he did this in the first place. And I would answer his question quite directly. If he's saying, is the animal okay? I would have to say, well, no, they're not. And that's where books and little videos and things are really helpful, because I think children are very visual. I'm not saying go and show them slaughterhouse footage. That's not what I'm saying. But there are lots of child-friendly things like Bite Size Vegan online. She's really, really helpful at explaining why dairy isn't nice, or eggs and things like that. And she does it in a way that it's just very kind of, it's quick and it's packed full of information for a child to hold their attention for that short space of time, but enough for them to go, oh yeah, he might just need that kind of consistency and unity from the family, even if they're not doing it, to be like, look, you're amazing, like look at what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what a wonderful thing that you're doing. Because at the minute it's probably a bit like that for him. It's probably a bit confusing.
It's probably a bit confusing if the rest of the family are eating something and he wants to be like the rest of the family, but doesn't want to contradict his values. So I guess that is quite tricky. I mean, my friends are very open to having chats, so I can have very honest and frank conversations with them. They also know it's just a lot of I mean, I guess as all of us as adults, changing any sort of habit that we've had for a lifetime can be really difficult, even when we know that it's the right thing, that it's the best thing for animals that we can do.
How good a friend are you with them? Because I think I try and be a bit cheeky and be like, well, how about you do it as well to support him?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that is going to be my comment. I'm very good friends, so it's fine. It's fine. I can say it. But I just there. Yeah, but I mean, I do think it's amazing. She does reach out and ask for, oh, he said this, or he's asked this. How do I respond to it? Or and I've also experienced it myself. My niece has also said to me, I've got so many inquisitive children in my life, and I don't have any of my own, but it is challenging. My niece said to me a couple of weeks ago, we were there, and sort of it was a girls' night, so we had the the snacks on the table, and she was organizing them into the vegan and non-vegan.
Okay.
And so she was checking the packets, and she's 12.
Right.
So she's a little bit older, but she said like, oh, you know, Auntie Lauren, this has got milk in it, but can you have that? And I said, no, I don't eat that. Oh, why not? What's wrong with milk? And I did have that moment where I kind of froze, like, ah. So I said to my friend, I was like, is it okay to have like a child-friendly conversation about why I don't drink milk? And I could hear my niece in the background going, you can tell me, just tell me the truth, just tell me. So it's difficult when they're at an age where they're not really small and you can just give them things and slowly feed them little bits of information. But when they're 12, they're much more curious and much more inquisitive and asking more and more questions. So, I mean, it was a test for me, and I don't know how you would handle it, but I just kind of responded with the very basic, like, well, you know how mummies have a baby to make milk? Yeah. And it suddenly clicked, and she said, oh, do cows also have to have a baby to make milk? And I said, yes, they do. She says, so how do we get the milk? And I said, well, the baby has to go. And that's all I had to say. And she was like, oh, that's so sad. And that was it. So I managed to just have a really basic, simple one. But I think it can also be really confusing for us sometimes, because we don't want to put trauma on our kids or shame them, or, you know, say things to them that can be quite complex for them to understand. And I don't want her to walk away feeling like, you know, the same way that we might feel sometimes.
I know, because you can feel quite burdened, can't you? Like even as an adult.
Definitely. So I mean, yeah, that's just a small seed, but I will definitely feed that back to my other friends, and I'll let you know how that conversation.
Yeah, do. Just going off what you said just then, I had one of the girls' friends, a little lad who's 8, ask us something recently, and I was kind of slightly out of the room, so I could hear how the girls were handling it. Basically we'd been out for a day. They're not a vegan family, we obviously are, and we were going to go somewhere which was a museum, which was fine, but they have an area where there are animals, which we never go to because we found out that they're there for food, so we don't go there. But this little lad really wanted to go in there, so the girls looked at me and they were like, can we go? And I was like, of course you can. Like, I'm not going to say no. Like, it's up to you. I just don't want you to be upset because you know the truth and everything. Anyway, we ended up going in, and then this little lad turned around and said to my girls, he looked at the turkeys and he laughed and he said, oh, they're going to kill that and chop it up and make it into meat. And my girls had turned around and defended themselves, and because he was obviously trying to upset them. And they called him mean, and they said something else. Anyway, I hadn't heard the conversation, but he came running up to me and said, the girls are being mean to me, and said that I'm mean for eating meat. Now, I hadn't heard anything prior, so I kind of jumped to a bit of, you know, I was a bit annoyed at my two, because I thought, well, hang on a minute, that's not how I've taught you to be. Like, you may feel like that, I feel like that, but you know, you can't say that. There's a way to say things. So because the mum was there as well, I said, girls, what's happened? Like, why did you say that? Like, you may feel like that, that's okay. I was trying to handle it all diplomatically. And then my youngest starts crying and she tells me what he said. So I was like, okay. And then I had this whole conversation with him and said, look, you know, that's not a nice thing to say, because you might be okay with that, but that upsets us. That's why we don't eat animals. Anyway, when we get home, I hear them all having this conversation in the kitchen. So I've stood back and tried to listen. And I knew my friend was listening as well. And I sometimes think, just leave the kids to deal with it, because us adults, we start wondering about, we overthink. We're like, oh gosh, what am I going to say? Is it going to scar them? Kids are just blunt. They just say it how it is. And it seems to go down a lot. You know, they handle it. And I think my youngest turned around and said, like, you know, she just gave a few truth bombs, and I could hear him going, well, I love animals and I would never hurt animals. And they turn and go, well, you can't love animals and eat them. And I heard this whole conversation unravel, and I came back in just to check everything was okay. And he was just asking them so many questions, and then turned around and said, but my daddy says I need to eat meat to be strong, and like held up his little non-existent biceps. And I laughed and turned around and just dropped a few truth bombs myself and said, but can you think of some of the biggest animals? And said about gorillas and you know, just how these big muscly animals and the ox and stuff. And I said, what do they eat? And he was like, plants. And I was like, yeah. So I said, that's not actually true, is it? And I kind of left it. But I think as adults, a lot of the time we try and kind of go around the houses, and I think kids just appreciate the truth. And I think you handled it really well with a 12-year-old. I probably would have been a little bit more blunt and just said, like, you know, what they kill the calf so humans can take the milk. But that, you know, that's probably just the way that I am at the moment with where I'm at with the frustrations of the activist world, and trying to talk to children about it, because I feel like our children get these horrible things thrown at them on a daily basis, and children saying, like, you know, trying to pick on them or tell them what they're missing out on, or, you know, waving ham and stuff in their faces, and they've got to put up with it all the time. I think sometimes I get tired and I just feel like just saying, well, no one else is telling them the truth, I'm just going to tell them the truth, because our kids have to endure so many things. But yeah, it's a really tricky one.
I totally get that, and maybe I do that because none of these are my kids, so
Yeah.
so maybe I would be the same. So try to be maybe a little bit more delicately. That's not to say I don't tell the parents. But yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna jump in there when you mentioned about your kids. I mean, I guess that was going to be a question that I had, was, do they get sort of comments and questions from other children, and how do they handle that, and are they confident now in their choices and in their responses that it doesn't affect? I mean, I'm sure it probably does affect them to some degree, but, you know, how do they handle that?
I've got very sensitive girls. They are very sensitive, but as I said, they're very proud of the way that we live. So I'm constantly trying to teach them as girls as well, to stand up for themselves and to be proud, and really try and empower them. So if anyone does ever say anything unkind or mean, they've got like a response, and they've got something to say back. So they haven't really, I think because they were obviously 1 and 3, all of their peers have really known them. They've only ever known them as vegan kids. And because they're nice, you know, they're really nice, good girls. I may be biased, but they are. They don't go around like trying to upset anyone at school, and they're well liked. So I think if they've had these comments about like, oh, you know, what are you eating or something, and my youngest just turns around and says, well, at least I'm not eating a pig's bum, and she's just quite like direct with it, and the kids are like, oh, no, I'm not. And she's like, well, yeah, you are. And then they have this whole funny conversation. And I think they really believe in you know, veganism and how we live. So that really helps. And that's why I wanted to have these characters for children to relate to. So they've got these superhero role models that are really strong, and that then the kids can see themselves like that, and then when they're in these situations, they can actually know that they're doing the right thing and they're living a really kind way. So they've got nothing to worry about if a kid says something mean or silly. It's just coming from that conditioned place from home and family, really. So that's how we've tried to bring our two up, to know that if someone says something unkind, it's not really coming from a place of unkindness. It's just the way they've been brought up and taught, and that will be the family at home and society, and try and tell them that we once we would never have been mean, but we once would have thought like, oh, is it safe to be vegan and this and that, and that's really just where it's coming from. So just give them a few comebacks, and yeah, they really don't have any problems. So we're quite lucky. But once again, they're modeling themselves on me and their dad, who are we're very strong with it, and we're very proud of it, and we don't shy away from conversations, and we're always there to be a voice. So I think that then goes deep with them, because they're seeing us like that, rather than, I've got some friends who are a lot more timid with it, and you know, that's fine, and I'll try and help them in other ways, but I think the kids will then mirror that. So
no, that was such an interesting response, thank you. That kind of made me think of the question I was going to ask here that we have written down, about from your own personal vegan journey, if there was any sort of struggles or hurdles, things that you found challenging, or an area where there's maybe like a lack of support, And I just sort of thought of that there because I'm really admiring how your girls are handling all the comments, and I wish I could have been like that when
Me too.
after exactly because I went vegan when I was very early 20s, but I remember one of the big things I struggled with was being a bit shy about saying vegan and not wanting to kind of start this big debate where it was, I was only one on my side, or appear awkward at parties or gatherings where maybe you have to bring your own food or request in advance for something. So, I think I was quite wish I could have handled it like your girls there and just sort of said some sort of points, and then but being really polite and civil about it as well, but also really sticking to what you believe in. So I guess as I say, from your journey, was there anything like that kind of cropped up that you thought, oh, this is a bit of a challenge, but is there any tips for kind of overcoming things like that?
By the way, I was completely the same as you. I was such a painfully shy child that I think now I'm trying to kind of do the opposite with my two. Like, they are shy by nature and they're very sensitive kids, which is why I'm working like so hard to try and show them that, look, I was exactly the same. But you're fighting for justice and you're on the right side here, so it's something to be really proud about, and speak up even if your voice shakes and all of these kind of things. And I think that's what we all needed, didn't we? If we could look back and talk to our younger self, like I was the same, so I'm kind of doing it but late. So
yeah, but that's great where your book will influence your kids' generations and generations after that as well, with the book and the animations.
I hope so.
Obviously we didn't get that, but that would have been so helpful to have that.
It would, I know, it really would. But I think for us, when we first went vegan, I did feel quite overwhelmed, probably for the first week. It wasn't like a really long time, but even though I was a veggie, as I said, like I was still like, oh my gosh, like I think we've been so deeply conditioned to view everything, animal products as normal and natural and necessary. But I think we all have a tendency to then overthink and worry, especially as a parent. You're thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Are they going to be getting all of the vitamins and nutrients? And rada. We automatically think if you remove animal products, we're all going to become like little zombies. So you're kind of trying to undo your own conditioning, even though we'd made the connection ourselves. We knew it was the right thing to do, but you're going through like this whole process of then undoing years and years and years of conditioning. So I would say that was the hardest thing for me, just that first bit of, right, let's just swap all of the milk and all of the products. We weren't eating as healthily back then, and now I try and do like a lot of whole food cooking, and we were probably doing a lot more alternate, like stuff with things in the oven. So at the time we were trying to find all of the alternative meats and things, and we had the added problem with my husband obviously not being able to eat gluten, so that was quite hard for us. But I think once I realized that I had all of the information, and I felt quite confident that the children, I could look at all of the things that the children could get. In fact, I had this chart up which had all of the what did it have? It was from Hillside Animal Sanctuary, and it just had each vegetable and each legume, and it said what it was giving you. And it was so reassuring, because then I just had that up in my kitchen and I was like, oh, right, okay, this is easy. So as long as I'm giving them, black beans here and broccoli here, and learning that there's calcium in broccoli and all of these things, which I never knew, it became quite easy then. So my advice for people would be just simplify the process. Like don't overthink. There's so many resources online, even that can become overwhelming. So kind of pick one resource and go with it. I also did Challenge 22, which I found really helpful, which is quite similar to like Veganuary. But just start by switching a couple of things. Maybe the milk, like we made that like a fun milk test for the girls. My 1-year-old was still breastfeeding, so it wasn't a big thing for her, but my 3-year-old, we'd obviously got her onto cow's milk, so they become quite addicted to that taste. So suddenly trying these 9 different nut plant milks, she was like, what is this? So we basically just added a bit of like chocolate powder, so we're making like little hot chocolates, and then seeing which one they liked, and then slowly reducing that over the week to the point that it didn't have any in. And they both settled on the soya milk. So it was like, we made it really fun. And then I just tried to like veganize all of our favorite meals and shepherd's pies and lasagnas, and just make it really simple, keep making all of the things that we liked. And we kind of settled quite quickly. I think people do it different ways, and some people just pick like one thing and do that over a month, but we kind of just went for it and did it as a family, and just kind of included the kids in the process, and made it like a fun little transition journey.
That's amazing, and that's really good advice about it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be, oh, this is just the same, but it doesn't taste as good. I think also we try and manage expectations, and we do it in a negative way as well. So like, this might not be as good as the real one, and that in itself is a negative comment. So of course we're then putting those things upon them. So being really inclusive and making fun activities out of it. I remember the same thing of like going through all the plant milks to find, oh gosh, but but now I've settled on one in coffee, one in tea, one for cereal, different ones, and I can take them all. That's totally fine, but personal preference. But I think that's it, isn't it? We also have to remember that even as non-vegans or vegetarians or whatever it is that people are eating, we all have preferences. There's also the same product by different brands, and we don't necessarily like that same product by all the different brands, regardless of whether we're vegan or meat eating or veggie. So I think we also have to, people should also like try and remember that it's also just a little bit about navigating the different ones, the ones that we like, the same way that we did before we decided that this is what we were going to do. There's certain things that you still don't like.
And don't they say it takes like 7 to 12 times of tasting something for your taste buds to adapt anyway? Like it takes quite a while sometimes. Like, I'm trying to get myself in love with olives, and my husband was like, eat an olive everywhere you go, and then you'll start liking them. And he's managed to love olives now, and I'm close behind. And we said that to the girls at the beginning as well. We were like, look, just try it. And because they've always been really good at just trying things, and if they didn't like it that first time, then we'll just try it again another day. We'd never like force them to have it. And then they're fantastic eaters now. They eat things that I never would have eaten as a kid, like courgettes and peppers and lentils and things which are just normal standard for us. I would have probably turned my nose up at that. So I think when you make it fun and you make it all an adventure, and remind them that they're these little superheroes, and they're saving the animals, and they're protecting the planet, and it's healthier anyway, and they're all positive things. You're right, it's how you are as an adult, and it's the words you use. The kids pick up on that, and then they go with it.
Definitely. Well, I think our timing is absolutely perfect. So I'm just going to open out. If anybody has any other questions that we haven't covered, feel free to ask now. We do have the links to your website and Instagram and whatnot on our events page, which we'll keep up, so anybody can go and check out your looking forward to seeing Vivi on TV.
Me
so
too.
I'm so excited by that.
We need a vegan millionaire to come and support us with it now. So if anybody knows anyone,
gosh, let me see what we can do. But do keep us posted. We would love to share. Rachel's just popped the link back to the event in the chat, so that they can find your resources. And I've also made a note of some of the places that we've talked about today, so we'll also mention those like in a follow-up to email to our supporters as well, and just try and help everybody get really good resources to sort of spur them on and get those empower those little people in our lives and the bigger people.
Definitely. And if you want me to send any of those Vegan Society resources or anything, then I can send them over to you, and then you can pop them wherever you need to. Perfect,
that would be great. But thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. I love your story. I feel such, like Rachel said, such admiration for your girls that are just like superheroes from the start. So they're going to be those smug ones in 20 years time when people ask, oh, how long have you been vegan? whereas the rest of us all feel, I think we all agree that we all wish we'd done it sooner. So yeah, so they can be smug. So well done you for
Thank
starting.
you. I'll tell them that. They'll feel all happy.
Please do.
I will.
But yeah, thanks so much for your time, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Thank you, Tina. It was lovely meeting you.
You too.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.